Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford, along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host Keith Crockford and today I am back chatting with Jake Field. Hi Jake.
Hi Keith.
So I was running down through the list of the 100 and something podcasts that we've done. In fact, I'm not even sure what number this one is, maybe 108, 109, and then realised that we've done lots of episodes on Machu Picchu, but we've never actually dedicated a whole podcast to the Salkantay Trek to Machu Picchu. And as Jake's just come back, we thought it would be a great opportunity to record the episode talking to everyone about the Salkantay Trek. Now, obviously, not every trip can go to plan, and the start of this trip certainly didn't go to plan. But we are in the process of recording an episode on why that trip didn't go to plan and the airline issues that we had with it. So we're not going to go into any detail on this episode about that because we will talk about that in full on another episode, because I feel it's really important on the podcast to not only talk about when things go right, but also about when things go wrong on a trip as well. And I would just like to point out now that it wasn't our doing it, the Bucket List Company, why that went wrong. But it did not get off to the best start, your trip, did it, Jake?
It did not. I was just very, very glad to get there in the end. But yeah, it is something that we'll need an entire podcast about all of these things. But spoilers, we did all get there and we did have a great trip to the Salkantay route. And I was really looking forward to this one because I hadn't done the Salkantay route before. So for me, I was looking at it as kind of like that first big adventure, up and over the pass and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was a fantastic trip on the whole.
Okay then. So as with any Machu Picchu trip, it's a long way to get there. Flight down to Peru. If you are wanting to go to South America, if you are wanting to do Machu Picchu or the Amazon or Brazil or the Patagonia Trek or Chile and Easter Island, you're going to need to prepare for a long journey to get there. But once you are there, we land in Lima, and take us away on the trip, Jake. Talk us through what happened on this Salkantay Trek.
So we landed in Lima, albeit a little bit later than we were expecting. So kind of the next big priority for us was getting to Cusco. So we went off to Cusco. And that's where, for a lot of people, it really felt like, okay, this is the start of the adventure. This is where it's all happening. And we had a really good mix of people on the trip. We had some really good, really nice people, different mix of careers and all that sort of stuff. So it was just off to a fantastic start. We all went straight into a bit of a tour around Cusco so they could get their bearings. It was mainly around kind of the square and the city of Cusco. And then the next day we headed out and we did a bit more of a tour around like the heritage sites nearby, which took more of the day, but it was a bit of a quick one on the day that we arrived. We went off to, there's a fantastic restaurant in Cusco called Nuna's, which we went to on the first night. And that was really great for everyone to be able to just chat and get to know each other properly, which was fantastic. It's something that we always do on our trips is make sure that there is time for everyone to really get to know each other. Next day they went on a tour.
Just on the group demographics,
Yeah.
What age range did you have on this trip?
So this actually was a really wide age range. So we had down at the younger end, we had 25 of kind of like that. So that was a guy on the trip, 25. And then towards the upper end, I believe 65 was, I think, the oldest person that we had on the trip. So actually a really wide split on this trip. But
what about in terms of male-female split? What about in terms of people traveling on their own, solo travelers? Like
so breaking it down fully then. So 25 to 65 was our age range. Male female split. I couldn't give you a percentage, but we had 2 guys, and then everybody else was female. It was a group size of 10 people. So
let me help you out with this, Jake, with my A-level maths. That's 20% male.
I thought it was
female.
To be fair,
quite an easy one to work that one out, actually.
When I started talking, I thought
Jake doesn't deal with any finances at the bucket list company. Okay.
I've got payroll to do this afternoon, so that's a bit worrying. No, when I started talking, I thought there were like 12 people, and I got myself. But I think, for simplicity, I think there were about 10 people. So yeah, 20% male, and the rest female. But fantastic group of people. Other demographics. So they were all. Let me see. Nobody came as a couple. So there were no couples on the trip. There was 3 sets of friends, and then the rest were all kind of solo travelers, I would say. And then
that's 60% and 40%. Okay, just to clear that.
All right, yeah. Again, it is a really good job that I don't do much of the finances anymore, and that's why I started out guiding. Really important. That was the career choice I made at the beginning. And then what else did we have? In terms of careers, actually, because of the time of year that this trip was being offered, the majority of people that came on the trip were teachers or worked in the education system. So that was something that was really interesting, was that actually, because of the time, the time of year that this trip fell and the dates that it fell within, most of the people that were booked on this trip were in the education system in some way. So yeah, that was really interesting. I think that helped everyone get on as well, because without knowing, like, everyone had very similar backgrounds and very similar experiences in terms of like careers.
And that's really interesting, actually, because we've spent a bit of time at the Bucket List Company looking at trip dates, haven't we? Because we do get a lot of people to say, like, and for some trips it doesn't work out, does it? Because, you know, an Everest base camp trek, for example, is really difficult because you either need to do it in spring or autumn, and there isn't long enough school holidays to actually do an Everest base camp trek in those times. But for Peru, like, it's a great, you know, you can do it in April, you could do it in half term, you could do it in the summer holidays, you could do it in October half term. It does kind of fit into that window for quite a lot more who work or, you know, who need to do it in school holiday times.
Yeah, it was a really appealing trip for everybody who was on it. I would say that, again, most people had chosen because of the dates. There were a couple of people who are now retired, so they had a bit more flexibility, but it still worked out really well for them in terms of time of year. You know, granted, going that time of year, because it fits in with school holidays, you do end up with slightly busier airports. So that's all things that I would say to people. You can plan a bit more in advance with your travel plans. You know, just bearing in mind that there might be a few more people around. But actually, when we got to Cusco, I would say it was no busier than it normally would be, and that was really nice.
I've never done Peru in August. I've kind of done May, June time. So what was the weather like in Lima, in Cusco in August?
So the weather was really nice. I was able to do quite a good comparison, having been out 2 months prior to do the Inca Trail. So I was able to really compare it within the season. It's a little bit colder than when you would go in May or June. But that was kind of it. It was still really, really clear weather. Again, don't really know how else to describe it apart from it just being a really nice time of year to go. I wasn't too worried about any big torrential downpours or anything. We were still kind of outside of that season. So yeah, August is actually still a really nice time of year to go. I suppose the only thing that is that you do have more of a risk of is, I think there's more risk of cloud. But again, marginal. Like, there's always a risk of cloud when you go to Machu Picchu. And I actually say to people, and I say it to people all the time when we do Peru, and I say, well, there's always a chance you're going to get cloud, but that's why it was built where it was built. It's because it's cloudy and it's because it's rarely seen. And that's what kept it hidden from the Spanish for so long. And it gives it quite a magical, mystical kind of atmosphere to it. And I end up like explaining it to people like that. And the last trip I did, I had a few people where, the trip before it was the Inca, and it was really sunny. I had a couple of people going, oh, I was kind of hoping it was going to be cloudy. Almost did too much of a good job.
I've been there plenty of times when it's been cloudy and, people are moaning that they can't see it, and you're kind of sat there waiting for a weather window to come through, and then you get it perfectly sunshine, there's no cloud, and they go, oh, it's not very atmospheric, is it? Like, it's kind of...
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with Cusco, though, isn't it? Like the weather at Cusco, you're at 3,300 meters. You're already at altitude as soon as you arrive. It could be a completely blue sky and sunny during the day, and you can be walking around in shorts and t-shirt. But as soon as that sun goes down, it gets very, very cold in the evenings, and you're certainly in your down jacket, in your trousers by the time the sun's gone down, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. But during the day, really lovely weather in Cusco, pretty much always. And then, in the evenings, if you've got like a layer to chuck over, which you will, if you're out there to do trekking, you will have a down jacket, you will have a fleece. So first couple of days in Cusco, really nice, getting to go sightseeing. And that's something we do on all of our trips. It's really important. You get to see these places, and everyone loved it. Again, always important on my trips is all of these food places. We got to go to a couple of different places this trip, actually, which was quite nice. So I don't know if you've ever been, but there's a place near to Uchos. So for those of you who have been to Peru, you'll know what we're talking about. If you haven't, it's a really amazing steak restaurant, steakhouse that we tend to visit as a company every time we go out there. But opposite that, there's a jazz bar. And we actually got to go, or we chose to go to this little jazz club when we were back. Have you done that, Keith? Have you been there?
No, jazz isn't my thing, actually. But I mean, I can imagine it's your kind of, thing, to be fair.
Oh yeah, really?
Yeah. I thought you're the kind of jazz kind of guy.
I had somebody say to me a little while ago, and I still don't know how to take this. It was we were having a breakfast in the morning, and he went, "Do you want tea or coffee?" And that day, I'd normally have coffee, but that day I said, "Oh, I'll have tea." And he looked at me and he went, "Yeah, I thought you'd be a tea drinker." I still don't really know what that was supposed to mean. But anyway,
Earl Grey, I imagine, out of a teapot.
I take a little china cup with me on all my trips.
Yeah.
So we went to this. So fantastic. Cusco is just a really, really incredible city to go and visit. And everybody says Cusco is better than Lima. Lima is very cool to go and explore, but Cusco is really a very cool place, and definitely the favorite of the two. We then had a briefing in the evening. So we went through and explained to everyone, myself and our guide, we went through everything that they would need. We gave them their duffel bags. We give you these little duffel bags so that you don't ruin your nice suitcases and duffel bags. Just to throw some clothes in, limited to 7 kilos, but you really don't need that much because it's not too long that you're going to be trekking.
I think the main reason why we use those small duffel bags is to limit how much stuff people can actually take. Because the trouble is, if you've got a 90-litre duffel bag, you will always fill a 90-litre duffel bag with things you think you're going to need for what basically is a 4-day trip. So by giving you a smaller duffel bag, it just means that you can't overpack. I think it works quite well in that sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is a bit of a challenge for people at the beginning when they look at the size of the bag and they hear 7 kilos and they just go, what? But as I explained to them, I go, but you're going to be wearing your boots and your first day of hiking clothing on day one. So instantly that's loads of stuff that you already don't need in. So you use a sleeping bag. Our guys will provide you with a roll mat if you want to rent a roll mat, or you can take a little inflatable bed or whatever. They'll supply you with an air bed, but they will give you like a roll mat as kind of like standard. So you don't need to worry about any of that. So actually, there's not really too much that you need to take. And then when I start breaking it down to people, it does become a bit more achievable and realistic. So we have that briefing. We explain what the next couple of days is going to look like. And then the next day we were off quite early, sort of 4:30 in the morning, to drive to the start point of the Salkantay Trek. And day one, drive in, we have breakfast when we arrive, and then we actually set off to go and reach the Humantay Lake. Still can't quite get the wording of that right, but that's pretty much your first day of trekking, and it's your first experience of altitude. So you get to gain some altitude pretty quickly by going up to the lake. It's a really classic spot in Peru, and actually it's one of those that is kind of nicknamed the Instagram route or the Instagram point. There's a few places in Peru that are very much targeted towards people going for a day to get that Instagram picture, but we've incorporated it into the start of our Salkantay Trek, which I really like. And then, different to some groups, we actually then continued hiking after we reached the lake. So we came back down, we had some lunch, and then we went further up the valley by about an hour and a half. And that's where we camped. So we were the only group camping up there on that evening in our area. All the other groups were back down the valley about an hour and a half, camping below where the mountain is to go to the lake. And what that meant was, when we had day two, which is quite a long day to go up and over the Salkantay Pass, we were an hour and a half ahead of everyone else. So we didn't have to get up as early as everybody else, and we'd already done quite a lot. So that was really nice. But that was kind of day one. It was a little bit chilly on the first night. You are quite high. You're sort of 4,000 meters, 4,100 meters at the first campsite. So it is a bit chilly. Day two, the views are stunning of the Salkantay Mountain from the first campsite that you're at. It's absolutely incredible. And the stars, I think for a lot of people, that was one of their main highlights of the trip, was seeing the stars from there, because there's no light pollution. So if you're into your nighttime photography, that's a really good place to get some incredible star pictures. But day two is a long day.
And just two-man tents?
Well, 3-man tents technically, but fit 2 people. So the tents are a reasonable size for 2 people. I would always say to people, just as a general bit of advice, and this is just the way that I like to do it, if it's you on your own doing lots of camping, buy a 2-man tent. If you want to go camping with somebody else, buy a 3-person. I always get 1 extra, and that's mainly because of just like equipment and kit. So you can have your roll mat and your sleeping bag set up on one side, and then you can keep your bag in the tent with you. Just gives you a little bit of room to get changed. Not because I'm the size of 2 men, which I was waiting for.
Jake needed his snack bag in there.
Yeah. It's these shoulders, Keith. That's what it is.
Yeah. But plenty of room to get changed. Like, you're not crammed into a little tent. You've got loads of space. Like, you've got, and I think that's the important thing in it. And is that, if it is wet, if you need to sort your kit out, you don't want to be in a little tent, do you? And I think, we certainly make sure that's the case on these trips, that you have got a little bit of space inside them as well. They're not super small, are they?
No, it's all of those things that really make or break a trip, in my opinion. Like when you first look at a trip online and you look through the day-by-day itineraries, those are quite often the details that mean a lot in the moment, but tend to be forgotten about when you're describing the trip online. So, when you're looking around and you're looking at, Machu Picchu treks, and you're looking at the Salkantay Trek and you read the day-by-day descriptions, lots of places all seem to go, along the same route and all this sort of stuff. But it really is in the detail about having tents that are slightly larger than they need to be, cook tents and dining tents that are slightly larger than they need to be, so you've got a bit of room. And a big one was that we gave all of our guys a hot water bottle to take to bed with them. And when it's sort of -7 up in the mountains, and they've all got great sleeping bags, but I have never seen people so happy to have a hot water bottle. It was just such a nice touch. And it's not something that we advertise. It's not something that we talk about necessarily, but it really does go a long way. And moments like that are really important.
But I think that's the important thing, though, isn't it? Is you don't want to give everyone all of the information, because it then takes away any surprise. And I remember doing a trip a few years ago where I had somebody who was repeating the trip. He had done it for the second time. And I had to take him aside at one point and say, can you stop telling everyone what happens next? Because I want them to experience it for themselves rather than knowing what's coming all the time. And I think that's like, you don't want to give too much away on an itinerary, because you want people to experience it for the first time. And I hear so many people saying, I haven't really researched this trip because, yes, I kind of know what I'm doing, but I want to experience it and have that emotion of it happening to me without knowing it's happening to me.
That's normally me and you saying that, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I think it is brilliant. And actually, I do, we have these conversations when you're having dinner in the evening, because, again, you're out in the middle of the mountains. There's not much to talk about, or there's not much to do. So you end up talking about loads of things while you're having dinner and stuff. And there's definitely two types of people. There's the people who have meticulously looked at the itinerary and know almost minute by minute, as much as they can, what you're doing and where you're going, all that sort of stuff. And then there's the other people that almost have got absolutely no idea. And I think that being a combination of the two, perhaps leaning slightly more towards the not knowing, is a really nice way to do these trips, because you don't have to worry, because it is all taken care of and everything's organized, everything's in place. If you were to rock up to Peru by yourself, that's very, very different. You should absolutely have a plan in place. But if you're going with ourselves, for instance, then yeah, you can rest assured that you're going to get to the places that you need to get to. But it keeps the days really fresh and entertaining.
And I think that's the other thing, is like when you're at the camps in the evenings, you have got a dining tent, you have got tables in there, you have got chairs in there, they've got lights in there, so you can sit in there in the evening and, you're kind of not stuck in your tent, are you? You can kind of go and socialize in the group tent, and quite often people will go and have a game of cards in the group tent in the evening and just talk about the day, or, it's a really sociable thing, I think, when you're camping on a trip like that.
Yeah, people really don't spend much time in their tents when it comes to, it's after dinner when everyone's kind of wound down. You just go there to sleep. It's not somewhere that you would, spend that much time in beforehand.
And I think, when you think about, I think it's very easy when you're in hotel rooms that people go back and spend their time in the hotel rooms, or if you're doing an Everest base camp trek and you've got a tea house room, or you're on the Marangu and you're in the huts. Like when you're camping on a trip, like any of our Machu Picchu treks, a lot of time is spent in that dining tent, not actually in the tents themselves. It's a lot more of a sociable atmosphere on those trips, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really nice. One, because that is what people are there for, and you do build up a relationship with the group that you're with. And two, because it tends to be warmer. It does tend to be a slightly warmer place. So yeah, if I'm then going on to day 2. So day 2 was the longest day by far on the Salkantay, and it was a challenging day. It was very achievable for everybody in my group. Like, I wasn't concerned that there was anybody who wasn't going to make it, but it was going to be a long day. You do 22 kilometers. You go to 4,600 meters and back down again. It takes you, I think it's sort of around you're looking at about a 10 to 12 hour day, realistically. So it is a long day. The emotions that were at the top of the pass from everybody, it was something that I wasn't expecting, and I'm quite expectant of people to be emotional when they reach Everest Base Camp, or even get into Machu Picchu itself. But I think people felt like it was such an incredible achievement, and it is an incredible achievement when you get up to the top of the Salkantay Pass. Because it was long. It was a lot of trekking, and it was reasonably tough. We tend to say the Salkantay is the harder of the 3 routes. So you've got the Lares being the easiest, the Inca in the middle, and then the Salkantay. Again, very achievable. We had a wide age range and a wide range of ability. I think that's the other thing. And I don't think if anybody's listening who I took on this trip, I don't think anybody would mind me saying there was a range of ability. And that was really nice as well, because it just showed how accessible it is. We then came down, we stopped for some lunch after we'd done the pass, and then we made our way much further down. So we were losing altitude all the time, made our way down into the campsite. Now, the campsite was slightly different to where we were before. So
was it easy walking on the way down, Jake, or was it?
I think it depends on, like, everybody who enjoys hiking tends to debate whether you prefer going up or down. I think that's a fairly conversation. You tend to fall into one or two categories. You either prefer going uphill or you prefer going downhill. I quite like the flat, but that seems to never come up in conversation. But
that's why you love the Sahara Desert Trek so much, isn't it?
Do you know what? I know we were having a conversation about top bucket list destinations, and the Sahara Desert is one that I was debating with because I do really love that trek. But yeah, it is flat, so that's a good advantage. But if you don't mind going down, then I'd say it's not too bad. It is a long way down, so you are looking at probably about 4 to 5 hours of hiking downhill. Now, that can really take it out on your knees. So if you're somebody who you have problems with your knees, then definitely be prepared to have knee supports, hiking poles, everything like that is definitely things that I would suggest that you bring. But it's not super steep. It's not like you're going to be coming down vertical faces or anything like that. So it's gradual. It's just also that can be the downside, is it is gradual, so it's consistently tough on the knees. When we got into the camp in the evening, as I said, it was a little bit different. So the night before, we were camping up in the mountains, sleeping between this kind of like surrounded by these rock walls that were protecting us from the wind and stuff. And then we get down, and then I thought we were going to be sleeping from what I've not done that trip before, but I know that we get to the campsite. I know what the campsite was like, but I thought we were going to be sleeping just out in this field almost. But we were actually in this building. So it's like a wooden building with a cooking and dining area underneath, and then you go up the stairs on the right hand side, and it's this big wooden platform that is actually like exposed and open to the elements, and then it's got like a roof, but there's a gap between where the roof is and then where like there's no windows or anything, so it's all, you get a lot of airflow. And then we were camping on this wooden platform, so everyone was kind of like in together. But it was really nice because because we were further down into the tropics, like the tents were bone dry, so you knew that all of your stuff was going to stay. You didn't have to worry about having soaking wet tents or anything like that. And then you just go down the stairs, and the meals are all prepared, and you sit on this big dining table. And actually, with that campsite, and what probably a lot of people don't realize with the Salkantay is because you stay in those kind of campsites, there was the ability to go and buy some beers, go and buy Fantas and Coca-Colas, because it is almost a proper campsite. So we all went and got ourselves a beer, and then we came back to dinner and had a beer while we were having dinner. It was really nice.
Sounds good to me.
So that was day 2, and then day 3 is a little bit of a shorter day. So we do about half a day's hiking around the trails, and you can go 2 ways. You can either go along the road, or you can go through the old trail, which is a bit more like up and down. We chose to go through the old trail, so it was a bit more up and down, but it was more interesting. And then we got to a point, we got picked up by a little bus just to transport us the last section on the road. It would have added on a couple of hours, and it was one of those where you're not really gaining anything from just walking on the side of the road. So we'd managed to hike the old trail, and then we got a bus for about 20 minutes. That then took us to our next campsite, which was really lovely. It was in a coffee plantation. So we had some lunch, and then we went on a tour of the coffee plantation, and we learned how they harvest, or how they grow the coffee, how they harvest it, how they roast the beans. Everybody was able to then get involved with roasting the beans, learning the whole process from start to finish, which was fantastic. So they actually went and picked some coffee beans, and then they went through the whole process. That was brilliant. Straight afterwards, we went to the hot springs. So there are these hot springs that you get on the Salkantay Trek. So we got the bus down there, and then everybody piled in. It was really nice after the day that we'd had the previous day going up and over the pass. Everyone's legs were aching a little bit. So to then be able to go into these hot springs was really, really nice for everyone. So we spent a couple of hours there as a group, and then we came back and had dinner. So actually day 3, really lovely day, much warmer in comparison. So you've only got one big long day on the Salkantay. And then our final day was another half a day and took us to the hydro. We hiked down to the hydroelectric plant, and it was a tougher day than I was expecting, but still only half a day, so not as challenging as day 2. We came up a little bit first at the campsite, and then we dropped down quite sharply. We that was quite a steep downhill day, all the way down to the hydroelectric plant. And from there, we then had lunch. That took us half a day. We then had lunch. We then got the train to Aguascalientes. Now you can hike, and lots of companies will hike from the hydroelectric dam, that was it, to Aguascalientes. But it's another couple of hours. And by midday, round by Aguascalientes, it is baking hot, and it's dusty, and it's just, again, I didn't feel like we were adding anything. So we, as our group, we get the train, which was a really cool experience. Get to Aguascalientes, had half a day to explore around there. So the group got to do a little bit of shopping, went out and had dinner in the evening. And then the next day was when we went to visit Machu Picchu. So talking about the differences between the 3 treks, the Inca Trail is the only trail to Machu Picchu where you descend into Machu Picchu. You actually get to hike into Machu Picchu. All of the other trips that we offer as well, the Lares and the Salkantay, you finish in Aguascalientes, and the next morning you get the early bus up to Machu Picchu, and then you go in that way. So for me, it was quite interesting to see it from a different perspective. I'd only hiked in the morning, but it was quite cool getting the bus up. And we made sure that we got the early one, so we were ahead of all the crowds.
For me, I kind of quite like that, because for me on a Machu Picchu trip, I think personally for myself that you've got the trek, and then Machu Picchu is like a whole separate activity as part of the itinerary. And I kind of like the fact that I've talked about it before, where I like the fact that I can go and have a shower and have clean clothes and go and enjoy Machu Picchu, not as a trekker that's just finished 4 days trekking in the same clothes that I've been wearing for the last 3 days. I kind of quite like that, to have that Machu Picchu experience and, you know, be able to make sure my phone and my camera is charged and know that I'm going in there. You know, I know you're going in there as a tourist, but I still feel like I've trekked to get there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, that was totally, yeah, I totally get what you mean. And it was really nice for me to experience it in that way. Like the previous 2 times I've done the Inca Trail, and I would say that when I'm doing the Inca Trail, part of that is that you get to hike into Machu Picchu and you walk in like the Inca would have done. And the way that I've always justified it is you get into Machu Picchu and you've been hiking for 3 or 4 days. You have got, you know, your clothes aren't smelling the best. You're not smelling the best. Like, you've got trekking poles, you've got a big backpack. You walk in and everyone's looking at you a little bit like you're an alien because you've clearly come off the trail. But then I get this sense of, you know, well, we've hiked in, and we feel very superior in that sense, and that's amazing, and all this sort of stuff. And that's how I convinced myself. Having done the Salkantay, stopping in a hotel room, having a shower, going to Machu Picchu, you then look at these people and you go, oh yeah, I'm really glad that I haven't done that. So I've definitely like sold it to myself by doing it the other way. But it was really nice. It was nice to be able to split it between the trekking and then Machu Picchu. And it also meant, and I don't know whether anyone else has felt like this, but when I visited Machu Picchu after, like, directly off the Inca Trail, I'm so, like, there's the section of like, well done, we finished, we've reached Machu Picchu, it's the end, that's amazing. And then you do the tour, but also you're quite tired because you've been up since 3 a.m. You're quite hungry because you ate breakfast hours ago. And I find that a little bit distracting. So you're walking around and you just feel like, I really want to have a shower, I really want to have something to eat. You got all of these feelings. Whereas having done that the previous day when you do the Salkantay, your attention can fully be on Machu Picchu. And I found that I learned a lot more this time round because I was in a better frame of mind to take it in, if that I don't know how you feel.
You'd eaten, Jake. That was the issue.
Yeah, but I was suddenly able to, like, oh, okay, well, I feel like I'm learning all of these things that I hadn't necessarily.
But I just think, you've had a good night's sleep in a hotel. And I think for a lot of people, Machu Picchu is on their bucket lists. They want to go. The whole point of that trip is to go and see Machu Picchu. And I just think that if you're going to take, if you can go up there and be fresh and enjoy that day, for me, that's why I like the Lares or I like the Salkantay over the Inca Trail. And I think, like you say, we've done both. Like, I've done them all. I've trekked in from the Sun Gate. I've got to the Sun Gate and it's been completely cloudy and I've not seen anything. So you think, well, that was pointless. I've been to the Sun Gate and it's been clear and you've got the most amazing view. And, it is a lottery. Like, as we were saying earlier, there is no, the reason it was built there is because it's cloudy. Like, there is no guarantee you're going to get that perfect, iconic view of Machu Picchu. But for me, I personally like doing it, the trek to Machu Picchu, staying in Aguas Calientes the night, and then going in the next day, clean clothes, fresh. You haven't got your walking boots on. You can wear a normal pair of trainers or approach shoes to wander around in. You've got everything charged up. And the other thing that I like is the fact that we do get the first bus up. We are one of the first people to get into Machu Picchu that morning. And the problem you've got is, I always think, is if you trek in from the Sun Gate, you're going to be like an hour and a half to get down to Machu Picchu. And then it's very crowded then already with the people who have just come up and done what you did from the Salkantay Trek. And, I remember one year I went into Machu Picchu. I think I was the 5th person into Machu Picchu. By the time we had gone up the first set of steps, I'd overtaken the Chinese and I walked around the corner and I was the first person to look down over Machu Picchu and there was nobody on the terraces below me. I had it to myself. You're never going to get that if you do go into the Sun Gate. And that's why I love doing either the Salkantay or the Lares for that exact reason. Because for me, the point of going to Machu Picchu is to go and see Machu Picchu. That is it. Like, that's what I want to do.
It's so funny. Like, I do agree with you in the sense that, by the time that we'd finished hiking and we were coming down, I mean, so many people. You see that where the buses are and it's carnage. And it is, I don't really love that part. That part is kind of almost like the penance in some way that you have to pay to kind of, it's like, okay, well, I accept that there's going to be loads of people around by the buses, but then we get this amazing experience of seeing Machu Picchu and having done the trekking. And that was something that a lot of my group said this time was they weren't so bothered by the crowds of people in Machu Picchu because they still felt like they got this really incredible experience hiking in the mountains, beforehand. So it was all this stuff. It does depend on personal preference. I know that myself, you and Dave have spoken about the 3 Machu Picchu trips, and we're talking about the Salkantay this time, and really, really, really enjoyed it. But I've always been a big fan of the Inca, and I think that for me, as much as I love the Salkantay, that's kind of a personal favorite because of the history. You've always loved the Lares. I think Dave's always been the Salkantay.
Yeah, Dave.
But it's really interesting because there's so many pros and cons to these both. And I will fully give it is that, the nice thing about the Salkantay and the Lares is that you get that break and you can change into it. It was so nice to be able to go, I'm going to change into some trainers and a pair of trousers for Machu Picchu rather than just whatever you've been trekking in, and just feel fresher. But that kind of took us to the end of our trekking, and we then got the train back. So all of our trips, we get the train back.
Oh, you finish in Machu Picchu, don't you? Then you come back down to Aguas Calientes again.
Yes.
And then you've got a few hours then you have dinner or you have lunch in Aguas Calientes, and normally you're getting like the mid-afternoon train back, aren't we?
That's true. And actually, with the Inca, the only experience of Aguas Calientes you get is after you've been to Machu Picchu, because that's what you have time for. Whereas with the Salkantay, it was a case of we'd explored for half a day the day before, and then when we came back from Machu Picchu on the bus, we had more time to explore as well, which was really nice for a lot of people.
And there are hot springs in Aguas Calientes as well. So if you haven't had enough of hot springs, you can go and do them. There's lots of nice bars, restaurants in Aguas Calientes. There's a lovely market in Aguas Calientes where you can go and buy all your blankets and your ponchos and everything else that you might want to take back with you. So there's plenty to do. Aguas Calientes is really a tourist hotspot, which won't suit everybody, but for a lot of people, they kind of like, if you've been out in the mountains for a couple of days, having a few days in Aguas Calientes is quite nice, I think.
I'm trying to work out how many times we've said Aguas Calientes now. It's just you can tell who's got the Duolingo streak. That's all I'm saying.
There we go.
So we got
502 days I'm on Duolingo now, just to let you know.
No, that is very good. So yeah, we had that time. We had lunch. We get the train back. The train is really iconic as well. I think it's really nice that we actually get to do the hikes in and then do the train journey back. I think that's quite impressive on its own. And then we get in. We have the evening. Now, for those that want to, you can go to Rainbow Mountain the following day, and I would recommend it whilst you're there, because it is the kind of thing where you go, as you are there, you may as well see all of those things that Peru has to offer. And Rainbow Mountain is another one of those Instagram hikes that people like to do. Much more crowded than any of the trekking that you will have done previously, but well worth it.
Again, a really early start, and I know I've said this before on the podcast, is I tend to get quite a lot of abuse from customers when we tell them what time we are leaving, and I don't tend to tell them straight away because I leave it as a nice little surprise for them. But that people don't understand, and it is a really early get up to go and do it. But the reason why we get up so early is to try and minimize those crowds. And I remember when I was there last year with a group, and we got there, and we were one of the first buses in the car park. We started our trek. We got up to the top. Everyone did their photos. It starts to get a little bit busier, and then you turn around and you start to trek back down, and you just see the hordes of people that are coming up towards you. And then people always say to me, "Oh yeah, Keith, I get it now. All right. I understand why we left so early." And it takes you, it's a 3-4 hour drive to get there from Cusco. So you have got time to go back to sleep on the bus. You can have a nap on the way back again. It's a long time to spend in a bus. I get that, but it is iconic. It is worth doing it. If you haven't done it, then go and do it. And I would always go and do it every time I'm there, just because, again, the weather's always different. You always see different things, but it is so iconic. But there is a reason. And if you were listening to this and you were going, make sure the trip that you were going on is an early start, because otherwise you will just be there full of people. So, that's my advice.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I know nobody can see this, but I've been nodding the whole time. I realise I'm nodding along in agreement, and the people listening will have no idea. That's what I'm doing. But yeah, that was kind of for us. Those that went to go and do Rainbow Mountain, that was kind of the last bit of trekking that they had on this adventure. Because the next day it was then time for us to head back. Now it always depends on flights. When you fly with us, we if you select a trip that has group flights available, we always try and get the best ones. And in this instance, it turned out that we were going to have another night in Lima. So we got the chance to go out and have another night in Lima, and a very early flight out the next morning. So that was kind of an advantage and disadvantage at the same time, but it was, quite nice to have that extra night in Lima. But sometimes we do fly back to Lima and then straight out again. And that's kind of normally what we do. But that's kind of it then, really, for the whole adventure. Obviously, that's the same on all of our trips with how we fly back. But yeah, it was a great experience. It was something that I was really looking forward to doing, because having only done the Inca, I didn't really have anything to compare it to. And
did you have anyone doing extensions on the back of this one, or did they all come back?
So nobody did an extension on the back of this one, but you can.
Which is rare recently, because on quite a lot of our trips, there are, there's always generally some people that will bolt on to that one, because again, it's such a long flight to get to South America that while you're there, you might as well kind of make the most of it. And we've got the Amazon add-on, and also we've got the Galapagos add-on as well, which has been super popular recently.
Yeah, so the Amazon and the Galapagos are two great add-ons to kind of bolt on to the end of your trip. What I would say, and I've been saying to people more recently, actually, is that contrary to popular belief and contrary to what we normally try and do, which is, you see a destination and it's we try and make it the very best it can be, so you would want to come back, but you don't feel like you need to come back. Well, I've actually started changing my mind about Machu Picchu and going, I think you need to come back and do Huayna Picchu, which is the big mountain at the back of it. I think if you haven't done Rainbow Mountain, you definitely need to do that. And I think whilst you're out there, and I had two people on the Inca Trail a couple of months ago, they had come out and done one of the trekking routes. They then came back to do another trekking route, and they bolted on the Galapagos and the Amazon at the end. And they said that although, yes, they had been to Peru before, having done it with us previously, it was a completely different trip in its own right and a fantastic adventure. So if you are listening and you've been to Peru, there's so much more that you can explore by doing a different route, and either, visiting Machu Picchu again, or doing Huayna Picchu at the background, Rainbow Mountain, or any of the bolt-ons at the end of the trip.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, there's two types of people in the world, aren't there? There's those that have got their bucket list and they want to go in, see somewhere different every time, but there's others that think actually there's something else that I want to go and see there or do. And, I think ultimately at some point we are going to have to launch a specific Ecuador Galapagos trip, because I think there are so many people that maybe want to go to the Galapagos, but maybe have been to Peru, don't want to go back to Peru again, and then don't have the option. So I think that's one that we do need to potentially look at for the future as well. But if you are going to Peru and the Galapagos is on your bucket list as well, then, combine those two trips is well worthwhile doing.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree.
Well, Jake, thanks ever so much for giving us that Salkantay Trek walkthrough. Hope those that have been listening have found it interesting. Hope that the Salkantay has made its way onto your bucket list. If you've got any questions about trekking to Machu Picchu or going to Peru, then please do contact us in the office. I'll put links into this trip into the show notes so you can go and have a look at the itinerary. But I think Jake has really covered that off in a lot of information there. So, but you can see which dates we've got, see the other trips, compare those and see which one would best suit you. And obviously there are other podcasts as well that we've done on which trip to Machu Picchu and packing for Machu Picchu and all of those sorts of topics. So have a look through the podcast list if you are not a regular listener and you may have missed one of those episodes. When you've turned off today, if you could just do me a quick favor and go and give us, if you've enjoyed, obviously only if you've enjoyed this podcast, but please go and give us a lovely 5-star review. And because that really does help this podcast get shared about and shown to more people if we are getting good reviews for the podcast. So if you have found this interesting, if you have enjoyed it, then please do go and give it a nice review, and that would really help us out. I will be back next week with another episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. But Jake, again, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
But until next week, See you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.